Hey, are you a dad facing a divorce and maybe a custody battle, but don't know what that means to your future? Stay tuned because I'm about to answer the three most asked questions. I know it's a really painful and scary time that you're worried you'll lose access to your kids and scared about what the loss of your family means to you. For 20 years, I have fathers come to my law office and ask essentially the same three questions. One, how long will it take? Two, what's it going to cost me? And three, what about my kids? So today I'm going to give you a brief overview of the law and some general idea of what you're facing. Every case is different, and one fact can totally change a case, so know that this is general information, and you need to actually speak to a lawyer to know what you're facing. But here are the basics. How long is it going to take? In California, we have a minimum period of 6 months between the time that somebody is served with papers before a judge can actually enter a divorce. What that means is you've got 6 months to go through all of the discovery process, to exchange documents, to understand what's going to happen with the kids and the property. Basically, if somebody wants to take it and really drag it out, we've had divorces that have gone on years, literally like 15 years. That's a worst case scenario, and most people don't actually have that happen to them. But it does happen to, people who are really, really, really angry with each other. Best case is by the time we're done with that 6-month waiting period, our judgment's ready to be entered. You're submitting it to the court, and the judge is going to sign off on it. What's the average case? Most people take somewhere between 6 months and 18 months. So what's this going to cost you? Well, first off, we've got assets. And the biggest question you've got is, what are your assets that you're splitting with your spouse? Because those assets that were accumulated between the two of you during marriage are community property, and those have to be split 50-50. The community property is just going to be split 50-50, but that doesn't always mean that we're going to sell everything and just liquidate it. What we do are called offsets frequently, where one party takes the house and the other party takes the business. And we do an equalizing payment because the house may have more equity or less equity than the business is worth. So to balance things out is why we go through that period of negotiations and why we do all of the disclosures to really get a clear picture of what's really in the community property. Secondly, we've got separate property now. Separate property are those things that were given to you by your mother or your father that you inherited from somebody, or they're separate property that you had before marriage. So if you have assets that were premarital, we're going to keep those assets to you, and those can be used rarely for some things like spousal support and child support, but generally your separate property is going to be your separate property, and what you came into the marriage with, you should leave the marriage with. Then we've got support. Now, there's two types of support. We've got spousal support, otherwise known as alimony. That's what one party is paying to the other to keep them in the standard to which they've grown accustomed during the marriage. So if you have a lifestyle that involves a lot of heavy travel, a lot of heavy shopping, you live a very lavish lifestyle, but your spouse doesn't work, you're probably going to be paying to support that. Now, spousal support generally runs about half the length of the marriage if it's under 10 years, is sort of the general rule of thumb. And after 10 years, the court has the power, but not the obligation, to award alimony or spousal support. And then we've got child support. And child support is very much a calculation done by a computer. We plug in basically two numbers that are really important. And one is your income and their income, gross income, and then how much time you spend with the child. And pretty much the way it works, to kind of get a back of the envelope sketch of what you're looking at, figure if you have one child and sort of the standard dad package of every other weekend and Wednesday night pizza dinner, which is about 20% custodial timeshare, figure about 25% of your gross paycheck is going to go for child support. And that's a round number. It's going to change. There's going to be a lot of other factors. And then we've got attorney's fees. And that's the part where everybody gets scared because it's like, oh my God, I'm going to spend all this money. She's going to rack up these really huge bills and I'm going to have to pay for everything. Well, maybe. And again, it all depends. Are you working? Is she working? How much money did they really spend on attorney's fees? How difficult was it to do discovery? Did we come to the divorce with all of our paperwork ready to go? Or did they have to bring all sorts of motions to try and drag paperwork out of us? Because that will just drive up the fees. If the other party wants to drive up the fees, they can. There's a lot of great ways to do that. The other side may want to play games because they're looking at it and thinking, well, you may end up having to pay our attorney's fees, so the bigger the fees are, the more you're going to have to pay. Possible. Some lawyers play that game, some lawyers don't. It all depends on the lawyer that your ex picks. Generally, if both parties have the ability to pay their own attorney's fees, the court generally makes them each pay their own attorney's fees. So then the last thing, the biggest thing, what you're most worried about, what about your kids? Custody. How are we going to handle custody? Well, with custody, we've got two big issues. We've got legal custody, which has to do with whether or not you have the right to the child's medical records, school records, the ability to make decisions for that child. Generally, the rule is legal custody is very hard to be taken away from you by a judge, because once you have a child, you have a legal right to raising that child and contributing towards their upbringing. So as a consequence, most judges don't try and take legal custody away from the other side unless there's a really good reason. And a really good reason would be some sort of either physical abuse or perhaps substance abuse. Those are big issues. Then we've got physical custody. Physical custody has to do with where does a child actually reside? Who are they with physically during the day? Generally, what we end up with is both parties have joint physical custody, meaning they both have some custody of the child. And then it's just a breakdown of how much time. So that's sort of a short overview of what I'm telling men about family law. If you want to learn more, feel free to check out the videos at mensfamilylaw.com. I got about 30 of these little videos there. They answer a whole bunch of questions. And if you want to do an in-depth consultation with me, if you're really concerned about what's going on, I do charge for those. Feel free to, though, give me a call and we'll schedule one. It's a $500 consultation fee because it's going to take about an hour to 2 hours, depending on what we're talking about. And you're going to walk away with a really good strategy and a plan one way or another going forward. So hope that helps.